Okay, so tell me a little bit about the Northwest School for the Deaf and how it got started.
Great. Yeah. Northwest School for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children was founded by two women, Judy Callahan and Karen Appleman, 41 years ago in 1982. They were both teachers of the deaf by trade, working in a public school system and working with deaf and hard of hearing kids themselves. And in their years of teaching, they believed that the educational system could be improved for deaf and hard of hearing kids. And they started talking about opening a school together. So they, sitting in one of their mom's backyards, started a conversation, and fast forward 41 years and here we are. When the school was founded, it was first a one-room preschool. So they were providing services to preschoolers only at that time. And the school and community has grown to now we provide services for our school age kids, which is preschool through 8th grade. And then we also have an early intervention program that provides services to birth to 3-year-olds. So families, when they learn that their child has different hearing levels, we have communication coaches that go into the homes and provide services to those families as well. And then we also have a district support team. So for districts that have deaf and hard of hearing students and might not have the resources that they need, they can contract with our school, and we have contractors that will go out and provide additional services to support those students in different districts. So we've grown quite a bit in the last 41 years and are feeling super strong and really grounded in the foundation of the school and the services we provide. We use a system called Signing Exact English as our teaching mode. So we're using a visual representation of English on our hands all day, every day. So when you come to the school, you'll see any given staff member or student doing simultaneous spoken English and signing exact English. So that's the communication mode we use to support literacy, knowing that most deaf and hard of hearing students are born to hearing families who don't know sign language and don't know much about deafness and communicating with people with different hearing levels. So this is a really strong way to get English language foundation for our students who are deaf or hard of hearing. And so that's the philosophy of the school that we were founded on, and we've kept that mission going forward and have found so much success with our students through the use of simultaneous spoken and signing English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if I could just ask, what are some of the services that you provide?
So we have a day school, which is, like a typical school, except for our school is for deaf and hard of hearing students only. So for preschool through 8th grade, you'll find that we provide those same things that happen in typical schools. The kids are getting math class, they're getting reading and writing and grammar. There's social emotional curriculum. The uniqueness of our school, because we provide services to deaf and hard of hearing students, is that all of our students have different hearing levels. We have a speech and language pathologist on staff who works with students who qualify for speech work. And so she'll meet with them to work on articulation. We have an audiologist on staff who supports any sort of difficulties coming up with like broken listening devices or, advancing technology. We have services for our birth to 3, like I mentioned. We have folks who go and support families as they're newly learning about deafness, which is a huge transition for many people's lives. Our students in our preschool through 8th grade, we also mainstream at a neighborhood school. So all of our students from kindergarten through 8th grade go for PE And this is an opportunity for our students to start learning how to use an interpreter, having access to some time with general ed hearing peers. We have full-time interpreters on staff, and our own vans. So our interpreters drive the students to their mainstream classes, interpret there, and then bring them back. And then starting in about third grade, we also mainstream some of our students for academics. So if kids are ready to go to like a math class or a reading class or a history class, then we can provide those services for students as well. And we have a really great school home connection. The communication that we do with families is pretty robust. Or we typically have teachers who communicate with families almost on a daily basis, just with little updates and how things are going. And then we do a weekly letter with like more comprehensive information about what was taught during the week or what events might be coming up. Our teachers do a monthly phone call home just to check in. And, I'm available to families if they have concerns or questions. So we're a pretty tight-knit community here, and really supporting the students in their educational path, and then supporting their families on this journey with them.
That's cool. So like any particular stakeholders that you partner with, whether that's SPS or any organization that can really help students who are deaf, have an inclusive education?
Yeah, so it's interesting, with deaf and hard of hearing kids, the notion of an inclusive education can be very different. Part of being in an inclusive or least restrictive environment for deaf and hard of hearing kids is so that they have access to peers who communicate in the same way they do, so that they have access to professionals who communicate in the same way they do. And so being in an environment where everybody is signing all the time provides them complete communication access, which is just essential to each student's development. And so the stakeholders that we partner with and engage with are varied. We contract with 18 to 20 different school districts this year, which means they are our stakeholders. We work with each of those districts very closely in planning the appropriate education for each of our children. We work with very closely with OSPI. We work very closely with all of our families. We have stakeholders. We have a phenomenal giving community who helps support the gap between what contracts for tuition are and what it costs to educate a child. So our districts typically through contracting cover roughly 80% of what it costs to educate a child. And then we have a fundraising team who covers that gap. So we have an amazing giving community that keeps us supported so that we can provide essential education for these students and increase all of our technology as new technology comes out, and increase services for SLP or audiology. Our stakeholders are each of our students and their families, so we work very closely with them as well. And then we have some folks out in the community who are great that we get to partner with. We take our students to Seattle Children's Theater a few times a year, and we've worked closely with them so our interpreters can go and interpret the play productions in signing exact English. So our students get to have that very rich experience. We work with the Burke Museum, who comes for 6 to 8 weeks out of the year, and they do really incredible science lessons at appropriate age level for all of our students. And then we do a big school field trip to go see the Burke Museum. We have an artist who is also a great supporter of the school, Lori Rosen-Ritt, who volunteers her time every year to support the 8th graders in doing art and creating a legacy gift to leave with the school. So we're fortunate. We have, individual stakeholders up to foundations and districts, and we work very closely with all of them.
That's cool. So like I know I didn't ask this on my notes here, but what I wanted to ask is what have you like noticed in terms of like really in terms of like getting and the services for people with who are deaf and hard of hearing like so that they could have an inclusive education, like what are some of the like the trend statistics that you've seen? Because I know like there's an equity gap in education and not a lot of people are receiving the services that they need. So I might be rambling, but do you know what I mean?
So I'm trying to follow you here. Are you asking what work the school is doing to close that gap?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, yeah. So, well, it's that happens in all different ways and comes from all different directions. So it starts with the way we staff the school. So interviewing teachers of the deaf, really understanding what their experiences are, how they're coming to us with their experiences, and what support they'll need as they're developing their career in deaf education and at our school in particular, and ensuring that our staff have the appropriate supports. And that one of the things we talk about pretty intensively during the interview time is diversity of our students and staff, and diversity of needs of our students as well. And ensuring that anyone that we are hiring is committed to creating an incredibly safe and loving place for our students to learn so that they have the ability to access their education while they're here. Being really committed to direct instruction with students who are deaf and hard of hearing, because we know that, as you said, there is that educational gap that happens for students who are marginalized, whether that's because of their additional needs for education or race or socioeconomic or gender, or the list goes on and on. And so we at Northwest School we value very deeply diversity and supporting those kids, students, and people who are most marginalized, and ensuring that the work that we're doing is centered around closing that gap, whether it's for opportunity, whether it's for education. So that's a priority for us, and it's work that we continue to do. There's from my perspective, it's a path that we will continue to learn about, and we get outside training for our staff, for ourselves, in order to ensure we're providing the students with what they need, staying current on trends that are happening in deaf education, making sure that we're implementing those things, doing annual and more frequently monthly and daily data collecting and assessment so that we know where students are achieving and where they're progressing and where they need additional support. And then looking at the needs of the students as a whole, and what does the appropriate amount of staffing look like to ensure that they are getting their needs met, to ensure that we have enough folks on staff to meet the varied educational impacts of being deaf and hard of hearing, particularly after a pandemic. So, at the time of seeing the impact of the pandemic and how education for all students was impacted, and in particular for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. So we hired an additional teacher to be a resource room teacher so that we can continue to fill that gap and ensure that students don't continue to fall behind and actually are able to catch up.
That's good. My next question here is, what sorts of impact does your organization have on the disability community? Like, in other words, what have you heard from like parents, students who were involved or are currently involved in the program? I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah, because of the uniqueness of our program, using Signing Exact English and having such a strong focus on communication, English development, literacy. That's a huge takeaway for many students and families as they go through our program. So often we hear folks talk about their access to learning the English language and how having that type of education and expansive communication options has provided a lot of access to a variety of people to communicate with. So in our program, we work specifically with each of our students one-on-one and then as whole groups all throughout the day. And we do speech articulation practice. We do auditory habilitation, so practicing listening and discriminating different sounds and being able to identify them. We work on English grammar all day, every day, intelligible speech, communicating through spoken and listening language, communicating through signing exact English and simultaneous spoken English. And then when our students transition to middle school, our 5th and 6th graders start to have access to American Sign Language classes 1 day a week, where they're learning American Sign Language, deaf culture, deaf history. And then our 7th and 8th graders transition up to 3 to 4 times a week. They have that American Sign Language class taught by a teacher who is deaf herself. And so this, all of this communication together is providing support for each individual student to achieve to their own ability these different styles of communication, so that as they leave our program, they have a wide variety of folks they can communicate with, right? So practicing for those, you know, we have kids who have hearing parents who don't know sign language. And so that oral communication practice is really critical for home communication. American Sign Language is used predominantly through deaf adults who sign. So we want to make sure that our students have access and learn American Sign Language as well, and really understand the history and culture of deaf and hard of hearing people. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry. I feel like I just started rambling.
No. That's pretty good. What I was going to ask finally is, like, you know, what 2 pieces of advice would you give like someone who might not know what resources to turn to if, you know, if a parent has a child who's deaf or hard of hearing and is just like trying to sort of navigate, you know, this new world of, you know, his or her child is deaf and doesn't know like what resources to turn to, because a lot of times families don't have the economic resources to really find those kinds of services for their child. So what 2 pieces of advice would you give?
Okay, 2 pieces of advice I would give are, so first, when a family learns about their child's different hearing levels, really talking with the audiologist about what their child's specific hearing level is, what the impact of that is, talk about listening devices and how they might support them. And then in Washington, because we have hearing screening at birth, many of the children we know about from birth. And so at that time where there's the identification of different hearing levels, families should be notified about the different services that are available for birth to 3. So I would highly recommend accessing those services. I know that it's hard when you're learning something new about your child, and it can feel overwhelming and life is so busy and you're a new parent. But the services that are provided by Birth to 3 programs are really incredible and actually quite supportive, like very supportive. So even though it's more to coordinate and it's time out of your day, it is all about supporting you and your family and your communication at home and how to navigate this new world. And then the second bit of advice I would give for families who are newly learning about their child or anywhere in their journey is to really network with other families who are having similar experiences, because you're not alone and it can feel very isolating. And for some families, there's a lot of trauma to process. It's very scary. So I would say use the resources that are available to you. There's a wonderful resource nationally, and we have also in the state of Washington called Hands and Voices. They do incredible work for families on this journey. So use your resources, make connections to other people on a similar journey. Know that you're not alone, and know that your child is going to be a beautiful human being that can do anything they set their mind to. You're going to have very similar ups and downs in your education journey, and watching your child grow and watching their friendships develop and change and shift, and all of the concerns and joys and exciting new experiences. Like, know those are out there for you too. All of that is part of raising this beautiful child that you have, and the impact on their hearing levels isn't going to change that part of your family.
Mm-hmm. Those are some really key pieces of advice there. Those are really important.